Hello, my name is Philip Hansen. I'm a teacher at Dubuque Senior High School, teach U.S. History, Economics, and AP Economics. The title of my research paper is Historical Thinking Strategies' Impact on Reading. The problem today is it feels that too many people are led by their emotions instead of by strong critical thinking skills. People today don't seem to have strong critical thinking skills to look at evidence from primary documents and make informed decisions. Harry Truman said a quote, "Not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers." President Truman would probably agree that today we want our students to be good readers so they can be good leaders. My social studies department at senior high school has impressed upon me that historical thinking strategies are the way good critical thinking skills are developed. Historical thinking strategies involve four strategies. You can see them on the screen here: sourcing, contextualization, close reading, and corroboration, which we use these skills to dissect primary sources. Besides my department, there are other researchers and teachers who agree that historical thinking strategies and examining primary documents are important to be used in the classroom. Fuller and Ferris and Nelson, in their study, mention that teaching using primary documents and historical thinking strategies helps improve students' speaking skills. Boxter, Van Dre, in their study, mentioned that the use of historical thinking strategies helps improve not only students' discussion skills, but also their writing skills. Weinberg, in his article, along with Walbert's article, mentioned the importance of using historical thinking strategies with primary documents as a way to improve students' writing and improve students' learning of reading. Much of the research seems to say that teachers using historical thinking strategies mostly help students in speaking and writing, but few articles I've found seem to mention how historical thinking strategies will help with literacy. This study's goal is to find more evidence to support this idea that historical thinking strategies can improve students' literacy. The goal of this research study is to prove that historical thinking strategies has the ability to improve student literacy. A secondary goal is to prove that teachers who teach historical thinking strategies with more frequency and depth, specifically Bloom's taxonomy depth, will improve students' literacy more compared to teachers who teach with less frequency and depth. So let's talk about the methodology. The methodology of my paper, first of all, the independent variable are the teachers. The teachers, all three involved in the study, will use historical thinking strategies. The goal will be to impact the dependent variable. The dependent variable is students' literacy scores on a post-assessment. They're going to do a pre-assessment, and they're going to do a post-assessment to measure their literacy scores. Now, I will run an ANOVA test on this study versus a t-test, because a t-test has one independent variable and maybe multiple dependent variables. But because I have three teachers and I want to compare them, I have to use an ANOVA test. And so I'll be using an ANOVA test for that reason. And again, I'm supposed to be measuring the before and after. Hopefully, there'll be a greater literacy after the teachers have taught using historical thinking strategies. The other part of my methodology is I'll be using a survey to measure the teacher's depth and frequency of historical thinking strategies. And so here's a question that I might ask a teacher. I might ask them this question to measure the frequency. I might ask, in this last unit, how often would you say you use historical thinking strategies in your regular teaching? So that would be an example of what a question might be on the survey. The other part of the survey might be questions like, please, in this last unit, how many times did you reach the knowledge level of Bloom's taxonomy when referring to historical thinking strategies? How often did you reach, from all the way, the different 6 levels to evaluation, the highest level of Bloom's taxonomy? How many times did you do that in your teaching of historical thinking strategies? the other part of my assessment, the tool I'm going to be using to measure student success, is the pre-assessment and post-assessments. Both of them are going to be set up similarly. They're going to have a historical thinking document, a primary document. They're going to have 5 questions. And so there's going to be 5 different primary documents. And so for each of these documents, the 5 questions are going to have at least one of the 4 historical thinking strategies. So, for example, maybe question 1 might be sourcing, question 2 might be contextualization, question 3 might be close reading, question 4 might be corroboration, and then question 5 might be close reading. And this way, I can measure all the different historical thinking strategies, ultimately trying to figure out, can students read critically? So who are the participants in the study? The junior class is required to take U.S. history. 3 of the 5 U.S. history teachers at my school are involved in the study. So most of the juniors are in this study. So these are the demographics for the junior class. As you can see, there are more girls than boys. You can see mostly white population. Feel free to pause the video if you'd like to look at the breakdown. Also, 31% of the school junior class receives free reduced lunch. Again, feel free to pause if you'd like to look at it more closely. Now let's get to the results. The results, there was little evidence to support the idea that historical thinking strategies improve students' literacy. 2 of the 3 teachers who were part of the study had their students' scores from their pre-assessments to their post-assessments went down, which then shows that maybe historical thinking strategies aren't as effective. You can see here at the bottom, you can see the pre-assessments and post-assessments. And then you can see here the students' average for all the classes, all of first teacher's classes was at 20.34 approximately. And for the third teacher, 20.67 or 68 for the pre-assessment. And of course, it went down to 19.8 something for the first teacher, and then you can see for the second teacher, they went down. You don't see the bottom of the graph in a sense. The bottom of the graph would go all the way down to 0. At the top of the graph would go all the way to 30 because students were asked 30 questions, and this is just showing how many they got right out of 30. There was, however, one teacher group 2, that the students' post-assessment scores went up. Again, there was little evidence to support the idea that historical thinking strategies improve students' literacy, not only from the pre- and post-assessment, but also when running an ANOVA test on the post-assessment scores, you can see the F value is 0.364. The F critical value is 3.07, and because the critical F value is greater than F value, this means that a null hypothesis is most likely true. What is a null hypothesis? It's the historical thinking strategies does not affect students' learning. Now, we have to look not just at the F value, but we also have to look at the P value. So the P value was 0.696. The P value, when compared to the alpha level, the alpha level is less than the P value, again supporting that the null hypothesis is more likely true. Some other things that when running my ANOVA test, I looked at the standard deviations, and you can see 2 of the 3 standard deviations from the pre-assessment to the post-assessment, the standard deviation went down. That means that the data was spread out, and they became a little bit closer, which means potentially the teachers were having an impact on students' scores, but this would still be an insignificant number. All of the standard deviations, as you look at here, are above 1, and therefore the data is greatly spread out, which means it's not probably reliable. Other things to mention in the results is looking at the teacher surveys and what the teacher said and the students' results. We found that teachers who taught with greater frequency and greater depth had students' average scores go down. So, so the greater frequency and greater depth created lower student literacy. Now the results may not be that strong, because there are some limitations. So let's talk about some of those limitations. The students decreased their scores on their post-assessments. This could be due to the fact that teachers are teaching historical thinking strategies too frequently, as suggested by the survey and the two teachers who taught with greater frequency and greater depth were the teachers whose post-assessment scores were lower. Maybe this is causing student burnout. Another limitation is that teachers' ages and gender might be somehow playing a factor in bringing down students' post-assessment scores. All the teachers in this study were male, so maybe that's playing into the results somehow. And I mentioned in my research paper many other external factors, which I don't have time to get into right now, but they're all estimates. There's no real evidence. They're just more guesses. There's lots of internal factors as well. We don't have time to talk about them here. If you'd like to look at them, feel free to pause the video. But there also might be some limitations that might cause a student's post-assessment scores to go down. Now let's talk about some implications. Some implications might be that frequency and text with advanced reading levels may be causing student burnout. Now, like I said, as suggested by the two teachers whose post-assessment scores went down, and they were the same teachers who had greater frequency in teaching historical thinking strategies. Some other implications is that this study hurts the idea that historical thinking strategies does more than just help improve students' speaking and writing ability, but it also improves students' literacy. This study doesn't seem to back that up, that literacy is part of one of those things that's helped by historical thinking strategies. Let's talk about some recommendations. For those who might choose to do another study like this, I would encourage them to record other strategies used besides historical thinking. For example, maybe lecture, group work. Some of those other strategies might be more affecting students' post-assessment scores, and so it'd be good to have record of that so you can track and see if there's anything else potentially affecting the scores. Some other recommendations is maybe give students give the surveys more frequently to the teachers. In this study we gave the surveys 4 times for that semester, but potentially the surveys need to be given daily or weekly, and that way the teacher will have better recall as to how often they really are reaching deeper levels of Bloom's taxonomy, and how well they are, how frequently they are covering the historical thinking strategies in the classroom. Another recommendation for those who are trying to replicate this study or study similar to it would be to have a larger sample size and a more representative sample size. As you can see, the junior class is mostly white, and so a more representative sample size might give a different assessment, pre- and post-assessment scores. A big recommendation would be to create control groups. And the control groups can measure multiple things. They can measure the depth of Bloom's taxonomy. If you had one group with a lower level of Bloom's taxonomy and another group with higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy, that way you can tease out whether that's truly affecting students' literacy scores. And then you could expose students to different levels of text. So you could have Group A being exposed to a simple level text, and Group B being exposed to more complex text, and then again seeing how that affects students' post-assessment literacy scores. Also, we could expose them to the different historical thinking strategy skills. Again, there's 4 of them, so we could have them when looking at documents. We could have Group A looking at just sourcing when they're looking at a document. We can have group B just looking at contextualization, and then might have a group C and a group C, a group C and a group D looking at close reading and corroboration, historical thinking strategies when they're looking at their documents. And maybe we can figure out, are students who are focusing more on sourcing doing better or worse on the post-assessment. Another thing we could do if we had control groups is we could look at the frequency of using historical thinking strategies, and we could see if that's truly causing burnout a little bit better. We could have a group with a little bit less frequency and a group with a lot more frequency, and see how that affects pre and post assessment scores. And again, this is frequency of looking at primary documents and historical thinking strategies. Another thing that I strongly recommend is having a longer time period. This study was only done over a semester, and so it would be good if this could be done over a year or even multiple years, so they could see if there's any patterns, or if there was that 1 year was an anomaly. Another recommendation would be to build up the frequency of using the historical thinking strategy. Start off with just once a month maybe, and then at the end maybe almost daily. But if we slowly build up there, then students may have less burnout. Also, not only build up the frequency, but build up the complexity of text, and so that students aren't overwhelmed with the text complexity, and therefore they don't get burned out. And they might score differently on the post-assessment test than again. Another recommendation is if frequency truly is a problem, of too much frequency of historical thinking strategies overwhelming students and burning them out, then school districts may need to create some pacing guides to keep teachers from overdoing it on students. The goal of this study, again, is to move students away from making decisions emotionally and hopefully make decisions using more critical thinking. Hopefully, if historical thinking strategies is not the way to build that strong critical thinking skill, hopefully we as a society find some other silver bullet, per se, that will help students build that critical thinking, so that when they look at a historical source or a news source today, that they can analyze that information and make good decisions. For our society's sake, I hope so. You can see my references there. If you'd like to pause the video, feel free to.